All right, we have Mark Farley with us today of Thermo Fisher Scientific. And what we're going to be talking about is we are going to be just kind of walking through some of the lessons that Mark has learned throughout his career in the technology industry. So, Mark, let's just go ahead and kick things off then a little bit. Just tell me a little bit about your journey to where you are right now in your career.
Okay, yeah, can do. And thanks for having me today, Doug. I've had a little bit of everything, I think, over time in my
Hmm.
career, right? I started off in my college days, really building up what I'd call it sort of a mini startup in terms of a new outreach service for the university, effectively an ISP, but back in the era when people were still sitting around floppy disks and stuff to get connected to the internet. Um, I went from there to do much more high tech with a company called Sequent, which is now part of IBM.
Hmm.
Specializing in very high performance compute system, and leading crazy projects there like the year 2000 efforts from way back in the day. Took a jaunt through consulting with EDS. Focused on service delivery in the Pacific Northwest, and then got a call from a company called FEI, where some of my old colleagues had gone, and they said, "No, you should come check this out." Right, they're making electron microscopes and doing really cool stuff, and uh, I was like, and then I decided, yeah, well, let's go see, right? And was sold from the get go when when we were looking at fields of atoms and such, and in the microscopes, which is just super cool, ultra high tech. And
It's hard for that to not feel really cool.
yeah,
Looking at
it
things at
was
the
really
atomic level.
fantastic. And then you get into the discussions about what they do for, or we're doing for semiconductor, for life
Hmm.
sciences, material sciences, and such. And so I started there, and that brought me into my journey today with Thermo Fisher as it was acquired a number of years ago. And I've been in the life sciences world, working in very large industry at this point
Hmm.
ever since.
Outstanding. I've I don't know, at least I've always found that that yeah the when you look at someone's career path from kind of looking back at it, sometimes it can feel like it was a progressive direction. I don't know. Speaking, looking at my career path, there are a lot of twists and turns that I will be very clear. I did not exactly know where it was going to go at the time.
Yeah, no question. And I would, I get that question a lot from people, especially if I'm doing
Yep.
mentoring work or something
Hmm.
else, right? There's been nothing completely linear
Yeah.
about anything that I've done, right? I've always had goals for my career, and some things I wanted to go accomplish and things that I enjoy doing. But
Hmm.
some of these connections just sort of happened, and some of them are very deliberate, and
Yeah.
you work with each.
Well, and I think this is a good segue to talk me through some of the times when you've encountered some setbacks, because we're talking about
Yeah,
some of those bends in the road. I know
yeah.
I've gone through a number of those myself, and I'd love to hear kind of what you encountered and how you were able to harness that, or what doors you noticed opened when other ones closed.
Yeah, I think probably the most embarrassing one was that I had.
You said that, not me.
Yeah, no, this was not the highlight of how I really want to do business, but I had an opportunity to lead a much larger account when I was consulting.
Hmm.
And I'd gone through the process. I was largely selected for the role. Um, and through a variety of kind of personal and other interactions, right? It became clear that this was probably not the right move for me at that
Yeah.
particular stage in my life. And it was really hard, right? Because I knew a lot of the people, they'd put a lot of trust in me, and I had I had to make a difficult decision on that one. And of course, when you when you do that, you land on the bench, right? And
Yeah.
you don't stay on the bench for very long. I had a few days of some very long soul searching, in that. And truthfully, and this is a credit to all of the leaders
Hmm.
at EDS at the time. They managed to find me another position within that time frame, and with a good scope of responsibility, and I think a lot of meaty things. And I took that and really ran with it to the greatest degree that I could. Right?
Hmm.
I think we did a lot of great things and everything else, but it highlighted to me and kind of reinforced that if you take care of your stakeholders, your teams, your customer,
Yeah.
those will pay themselves back to you in that. And I also took away that I need to consider more than just career advancement in the work that I was doing. Right, that you got to look at the whole picture. But I really am grateful to all the folks who helped me through that one. And
Hmm.
there were a lot a lot of ways that could have gone otherwise. And I was at the time I was expecting to be unemployed and out, and what I actually got was a very meaningful set of experiences, and did my best to give back to the teams that supported me.
Well, and a couple of things I want to want to unpack a little bit there. So first of all, for anybody who's listening and is unfamiliar with the notion of the bench in consulting, is that's a euphemism for basically saying that you are not earning money for the company because you're not billing out to a client. So depending on the type of agency you're working for, being on the bench for too long is not great. And as you said, it can be that bench can slide out the door to being unemployed very easily, again depending on the company. But one of the things that, at least that I found, is that when you're going through like difficult types of situations like that. So like for me, I was let go from my role at Lattice Semiconductor at the very beginning of COVID, and here I am unemployed with like 40 million other people. And you do a lot of soul searching in those types of situations, and I think that sometimes that introspecting doesn't necessarily happen quite as much when you're in the normal day-to-day hustle and bustle. Is that aligned with your experience?
Absolutely, and I think you take stock of what really matters, of
Uh-huh.
the people and the community that you have in those circumstances, and you work to emerge stronger from it. As we were talking about a minute ago, I don't have a linear theory on my career, right?
Yeah.
I still could be successful, right? And have made it down the road. It was really the relationships that I built and the work that I done that mattered.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Completely agree. Well, so let's take a little bit of a turn now, because of course you're VP of technology at Thermo Fisher Scientific, which is a rather large enterprise. So tell me some of the lessons you've learned from being in that technology role at a big enterprise company. Like, I'm trying to think of a short way to say. I suppose I don't know. Do you use an acronym like TFS, or because that Thermo Fisher Scientific is just a mouthful?
Yeah, it doesn't. It is long, but we do actually typically go with Thermo Fisher.
Okay.
So my role here is as vice president for information technology for part of the business known as analytical
Hmm.
instruments, and you won't be surprised to learn that we make analytical instruments. And things like the microscopy components and such from my background fit
Hmm.
into that portfolio. Um, I've worked across a lot of different sizes of
Yeah.
organizations through my time, right? Everything from effectively startup sized organizations where we were scraping every penny that we could to make it work and grow our user base and our
Hmm.
customers, to very large organizations like EDS and now Thermo Fisher. And I think what I find is that each has their own flavor and own their own means, right?
Yeah.
Thermo Fisher is an amazing company, right? Very much mission driven, and I'm very proud to be able to work for them. I think if I think about the larger organizations, right?
Hmm.
I'm always impressed by the depth of capabilities
Yeah.
across across the organization, right? I learn something new every day, right? There's no possible way that I could know everything that was going on in any given time. And of course we have to some degree on the technology side a number of riches there, right? The question is how best to bring those to bear.
Hmm.
And it's a good reminder that the technology in the portfolio and such, and this has been true in every size of business, isn't usually my biggest challenge, right?
Yeah.
It's about how do you build the network of people, how do you manage the change within the organization to really drive to the outcomes, and hit your customers'
Yep.
expectations in there, right? So spending the time to nurture that and to make sure you have the right pieces is critically important, right? The technology components are the table stakes.
No, that makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, as an example, we were integrating FEI into Thermo Fisher, and I was working with our services organization on a number of digital initiatives that we were thinking about. And I made the decision, which I think actually paid dividends far greater than I was expecting, to spend about a fifth of the week really on just meeting different people that were kind of in my extended network.
Hmm.
It had connections to some of this work, or I thought would have connections to some of this work, and just to talk to those folks. And some accepted the meeting, some didn't. But at the end of all of it, I learned an incredible amount. Right? It gave me this huge perspective that I wouldn't have otherwise had. And I still use those connections through today for a lot of the work that we're doing more broadly beyond the service organizations and across the organization to help drive our mission and
Hmm.
fulfill our customers' needs. So that's been super helpful, and I think it's been true everywhere that I've ever been, and in all of the work that I've ever done.
Now, out of curiosity, since yeah, I'm thinking since we're in the sort of the virtual world right now, I think there's a tendency to want to say if you're going to do execute a strategy like that, which I think is genius, but there's a tendency to want to do like all of that through Zoom meetings. And I'm just kind of curious. Did you do most of your networking virtually? Was it, was there a mix with on-site, or was this from back in the before times when people worked at the same place?
Uh, all of the above, I think,
Mm.
is the answer, right? When you're dealing with an organization with global reach of a larger organization, there's a certain amount of virtual meetings were needed,
Uh-huh.
um, and I took advantage of those. I was traveling fairly frequently prior to COVID, so whenever I was at a given site where I had stakeholders, I would try and meet up with them in person. And of course, if there was someone locally, we'd try and connect. But probably about 50% were remote meetings, just because that was the only possibility to schedule within a reasonable period of time. And it tends to have some convenience factor,
Yeah.
especially when you're looking to learn from the person that you're contacting. You make it as easy as possible.
No, that makes sense. Well, and I think that's actually that's inspiring too, because that means that a if you're talking at least 50% virtual, that means pretty much anybody can execute the strategy.
Yeah. And weirdly, it was as simple as just making a basic stakeholder map and, starting to think through who was connected to who, and, what their interests would be. And if they intersected with some of the work that I was charged to go do, then it
Hmm.
made for a logical reason to have a conversation. And, I did a lot more listening than I did talking in all of those meetings. And you get just as I said, amazing perspective on
Hmm.
how does each person look at the various scenarios that we were pursuing, which had a lot to do with how do we make our products more robust and give our customers better value through our services, uh, which helped me down the road because I was able to kind of put myself into their shoes and try and consider things from different perspectives.
No, that absolutely that completely makes sense. And yeah, I especially like that part about listen more than you talk. I've especially in my younger days, I really struggled with that. Depending on who you're talking to, some people might say that I still struggle with it, but I think that's probably the way to get the most out of networking with people is to just really listen to what they have to say, and that's definitely how you'll learn the most.
Yeah, yes, I'm a big fan. I'm not always perfect
Yeah.
in that regard, but particularly with leadership roles, right? It's easy to jump in because you have something that you think is valuable to offer,
Yeah.
but it can derail a whole discussion at the same time. So being purposeful and mindful of that, and trying to make sure that everybody gets a say in each discussion is equally important to me because we've got a lot of great minds.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. All right. Well, next thing I'd like to hear from you about is tell me about, kind of what are some of the results or things you've been able to achieve in your career that you're the most proud of?
Mm. That's a great question, but it's hard, right? I I tend to put it in the perspective of things where we've either helped our teams or we've
Hmm.
we really helped our customers. So
Yeah.
if you kind of go back to the very beginning, right? Working with Oregon State, we were trying to set up community outreach work. So the more people that we connected with, right, the
Hmm.
better that was going. And it was very much a case of really starting from a core of about 20 invested stakeholders, and then moving that up to a couple thousand people, and then ultimately spinning it off of the university, right? I think
Hmm.
that took a lot of grit and determination by everybody
Yeah.
who was doing it, and I think we made a good difference to the community, and it was a good example of where the university was really giving back to their community. If I think about FEI, I think
Hmm.
about we had some fairly difficult issues with some of the work that we were doing with the global IT teams, and I spent a lot of time really just working on how do we integrate those teams, how do we build trust across the different regions, to the point where in a roughly 3 week period, we picked up the family and moved to the Netherlands for
Whew.
a while, and tried to work from the other lens, but really proud of the what the team was able to accomplish after that. I mean, we built a really strong team with some,
Hmm.
some great people, and they went on to do, I think, some incredible work for the company, and it really speaks well for everyone. We came from a difficult place, but we emerged much stronger. And then, a lot of the work that I'm doing today, which I
Yeah.
really enjoy doing, is about digital transformation, right?
Hmm.
And I'm fortunate, and often humbled to be working inside of Thermo Fisher because we have such a breadth of capabilities across the different life sciences and industrial capabilities that we have. I mean, it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
Really,
Right.
I learn about something new
Yeah.
that we do. So, the ability to be able to connect that to a mission of a company
Hmm.
like Thermo Fisher is amazing. And it's something that as I said, I'm both humbled and proud to be able to make a contribution there and
Uh-huh.
really help fulfill the mission of the company.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. Well, I'm just gonna say I'm gonna go off script a little bit because I had a couple more questions I wanted to ask, but I kind of like this. I like this thread of conversation. So because like what you're really telling me about, or what I was really hearing, was the importance of really kind of developing teams and people. Tell me a little bit about how you've done that, or what have you found to be most effective.
What have I found to be most effective? A lot of it comes back to, I would say, just some almost basic values that I have, right? One is I'm only successful in the work that I do, because of the rest of the people in the organization,
Hmm.
right? So that has to always be in balance, and you need to make sure that if you're in a leadership position, you're helping to develop the people in your organization, right? That you take proper care and attention to what they need in order to be successful as well. I think I try to employ a good amount of listening to speaking,
Hmm.
right? We've got a lot of good and very diverse perspectives on things, especially across the globe, and making sure that I'm in tune with what makes sense. That I have the right context for in my case, the decisions that I'm making that will potentially affect the rest of the organization. Because
Hmm.
it's super easy for me to see it one way and then
Yep.
realize down the road that I've created a lot of pain and grief for the teams, and making time for the conversation, the development of the people. But there's no real substitute, for sometimes getting teams together and having them work on joint problems and such. That builds great camaraderie. It helps to strengthen all of the work that I think everybody's doing. And when you build up that level of trust and people trust, from a leadership perspective, that you're gonna do the right things, you can
Hmm.
really go on to do some amazing work.
Yeah, that's outstanding. That's excellent. Well, okay, let me one last question then. Is there something I should have asked but didn't? Are there any questions that I left on the table?
um, I guess I'm curious, right? You've
Yeah.
done a lot of these interviews over
Yeah.
time. Um, what's the biggest learning that you've taken away from some of these?
That's definitely that's a really good question. The thing that I've observed is that the techniques are not nearly as important as the mindset, because everybody I've had conversations with, the people who are effective leaders, they really have that people first, value first mindset. And I believe that you can apply that mindset to just about any tool set and get to where you need to go. But just tell you, the biggest thing I've taken away is how important that value and team mindset really is.
Interesting. And are there particular sort of common qualities that you find in there, or techniques that people apply to
Well, let's
get
see.
there?
So, yeah, one of the things I've found is that, and this is speaking from some personal experience too, is that a lot of times people who end up being in leadership capacities, they are almost always very capable people. The problem is that if you are capable, you're capable, and you haven't run into any, and you haven't fell in any any ditches or pits for a number of years, you can start to get a little bit of an elevated sense of yourself. So I think sometimes I think that some of the best leaders come from when they've been knocked down and had to get back up, because that helps to instill some of that humility that you really need, I think, in order to have that next level of empathy with your team. Otherwise, it's really easy to be a whip cracker, but it's a lot harder to really lead from a genuine perspective. And I think some of that just comes from, you need to have some genuine bruises.
Yeah, no, that certainly I have lots of examples. Um, Personally, and I'm a big fan of leading from the front
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah.
You need to be out there with
Well,
with the team
yeah,
and
yeah. Well,
helping.
that's one of the things I've always thought would be an interesting interview question, because a lot of times, like, tell me about one of your biggest accomplishments, and I would almost say, kind of ask the anti-question, right? Tell me about the biggest blunder you were ever a part of.
Yes.
What were you thinking at the time, and what did you learn
Yeah.
from it?
Yeah. You're gonna get people saying, yeah, I do agree. I think there's lots to be learned from what didn't go well, as well as what did go well.
That's right. Yeah, I'm fond of saying that, of explaining, past goofy things. I like to say, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. That that explains pretty much all of my teenage years and most of my 20s.
Indeed. But then again, I'd love to see us get more experimentation into things,
Yeah.
and in order to do that, right, you have to be willing to take on some endeavors that don't
Well,
succeed.
well, exactly. Yeah. If you know it's going to work, you're not taking a risk.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But there is a lot of that in IT, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of equal parts. Run the playbooks that you know work so that you
Hmm.
can help support and grow your business, take care of your customer. And then on the innovation front, there's a lot of experimentation, right? Not all of my crazy ideas have worked out the way that I was hoping that they would.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, Mark, this has been a lot of fun. Give us your last one or two thoughts, and then let everybody know where you're most active on social media.
Uh, I'm not sure I have a lot of additional wisdom to share beyond kind of what we've discussed today. If you want to find me, right, you can usually find me on LinkedIn.
Gotcha.
Is probably your best bet from a professional standpoint.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Hey, Mark, really, really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I appreciated it and had a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.